Well, last week's episode of the Great British Bake Off was the finale, and what a show it was. So I thought here on Rose's AI, we'd have a bit of a season finale of our own. Welcome to Rose's AI, welcome to baking and learning about AI at the same time. Now today, there are three key things that I want you to learn. The first is that there are different types of AI, and if you know what type of AI you're using, you will have a better understanding of its strengths and weaknesses. Second learning point. There are 5 questions that you should always ask before using AI, and I will talk you through those 5 questions. And third learning point, AI is fundamentally unable to do certain things. Some tasks just require human judgment, and I'm going to teach you about those through the delicious Tarte Tatin. Now in front of me I have a block of frozen puff pastry. I made extra when I was last making puff pastry, and I need to wait for it to defrost. And I need it to defrost slowly to maintain those lovely layers in the puff pastry that will give us that lovely flaky texture. So whilst I'm patiently waiting for my puff pastry to defrost, I'm going to talk you through the first 2 of those 3 learning points for today's episode. So different types of AI. Well, let's have a little board to help here. So up the top we have GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. Now some people don't really think of these as being AI, but they are quite useful systems. They're rule-based. You might have a medical diagnostic system, for example, where you have a lot of rules about symptoms and treatments and tests that you should do. So if a patient presents, the AI would tell you to do a particular test or try a particular treatment. Now, these were very popular when I first started studying AI back in the 1990s, and they're very useful because they're very transparent. You can see exactly why the AI's made the decision it's made, because you can see which rules are fired. But they can't learn. They're not as powerful as our machine learning systems. So most of our AI these days is machine learning AI, although we do still sometimes use those rule-based systems in hybrid machine learning, good old-fashioned AI systems, because of the power of the transparency of those rules. But with machine learning, we have different types of machine learning, and it's really useful if you understand what type of machine learning you're using. Now, primarily, we have generative AI, tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Claude, Midjourney, Sora. These are the generative AI tools, and there are loads of them out there. Now, these systems generate images, text, movies, based on the instructions that we give them, the requests that we make. And they pattern match because they've been trained on huge amounts of data. But remember the chocolate mousse episode. When we made chocolate mousse, I showed how generative AI can hallucinate by whipping up and mixing true information with information that it has made up to fill in the gaps. Now these days, the generative AI systems are much better at avoiding hallucinations, but they do still hallucinate, but they're much more subtle than the ones we saw in the early versions of these AI systems. And then over here we have discriminative AI. So this is non-generative AI. And you remember when we did ginger biscuits, we talked about the cookie cutter and the way that AI can be biased because it can only make decisions based on the training that we have given it. So if we give it information that tells the system that chief executives look a particular way, for example, then that's the pattern and the cookie cutter the system will have for a chief executive. So we need to be careful to recognize that these discriminative AI systems are biased due to the data that we train them on. And that's true for our generative AI systems as well. All machine learning is only really as good as the data that we use to train it on. Of course, we need good algorithms and processing power, but really the data is fundamental to the quality of the learning we can achieve with our AI tools. And then within the category of machine learning, we have supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning. Now, if you look at supervised machine learning, this is where we have a machine learning tool that we train by telling it what it's looking at. So say we want an image recognition system or a facial recognition system, perhaps a passport gate, for example. Then we will train the AI on millions of examples of faces and characteristics and tie them to identities. Or perhaps we want a system that's going to recognize all pets. So we'll train the system on millions of examples of cats and dogs and hamsters, and that data will be labelled, as we call it. So we will tell the AI, these are pictures of dogs, and we will help it to learn what a dog looks like. And then it can classify future pictures as being of a particular category: dog, cat, hamster, etc. But then we also have unsupervised machine learning. And this is where the AI looks for patterns in the data, but we don't tell it what to look for. So you often find this used in e-commerce to see patterns in customer behaviour, for example. Or we might see it in news collations or news aggregators or recommender systems, where the AI is looking for a pattern in the data, but we're not telling it what to look for. So it won't know whether the pattern it's finding is meaningful or not. We as humans will have to look at that pattern and decide if that's a meaningful pattern or not. Now, when you use an AI, it's really useful for you to know what type of AI it is. Is it a good old-fashioned AI system that just uses rules? Is it more likely a machine learning system? If it is it a generative AI system? Because these systems are riskier, because they hallucinate, and they're only as good as the vast amounts of training data that they've experienced? Or is it a discriminative AI system, a system that isn't generative, that isn't going to be generating new text, images, or videos according to your instructions? It's going to be helping you to find patterns in data. And if it is a discriminative AI system, is it a supervised learning system, i.e. we've given it examples and told it what those examples represent as we've trained it to recognise particular patterns, patterns that represent a face, patterns that represent a dog, a cat or a hamster, for example? Or is it unsupervised learning, where it's just looking for patterns in data and we as humans need to help it make sense of those patterns? So they are the basic types of AI, and if you understand the basic types and what type you're using, you will understand much more about its strengths and its weaknesses. Now, I said in my second learning point for today there would be 5 questions you should always ask when you're using an AI system. That first question: what type of AI is it? Remember when we made those delicious profiteroles in Patisserie Week? I showed you how you can't always tell what something's like on the inside just by looking at the outside. And this is true with our AI systems. If you know what type of AI system you're using, you will have a better understanding of its strengths and particular weaknesses. So if you know it's a good old-fashioned AI rule-based system, you will know that it's transparent, but it's limited by the quality of the rules that have been written to determine what it can do. If it's a machine learning system, you want to know, is it a generative AI system? Because then you'll be better prepared for those hallucinations. Or is it a discriminative AI system? In which case, yes, you still need to worry about bias in training data, but you're not going to get those hallucinations that you get with generative AI. So knowing the type of AI is your first tool in becoming a power user of AI. The second question you should ask is, what data has this machine learning AI system, if indeed it is a machine learning AI system, been trained on? Because remember the gingerbread cookie episode. The cookie cutters, the patterns in the data that we use for training determine what the AI gives us as a result. So we need to know if there are biases in that data. Is the data that's being used by our AI system representative of the population that we want to use that system with? Say I want to use it with a class of students in the UK. Well, is the data that the system's been trained on appropriate for students operating under the UK curriculum and education system? We need to know. We need to know what the data is that's been used. And third question, we need to know what kind of failure might happen with our AI system. Remember when we made Yorkshire puddings, we could see failure if the fat isn't hot enough when we add the batter the Yorkshire pudding doesn't rise. In all of previous episodes, there have been aspects of what we're baking that can fail. And on each occasion, we've seen how when we use that to understand AI, we can see how our AI systems, perhaps the data isn't good enough quality, the algorithm isn't running appropriately, we haven't spent enough time training it, it hasn't learnt enough, or maybe we've overfitted the training and all our AI system can do is memorize things. So it fails because it can't generalize its knowledge. Or maybe there's something wrong with the processing power. So remember that AI systems can fail, and knowing how they might fail can help you be more powerful as an AI user. The fourth question you should ask is, who benefits from this AI? Is it me or is it the company who's made the AI? Remember the stickiness of the meringue in the pavlova. Most technology companies build systems to make us stick to them. But is that good for us? Or is it a bit like the pavlova? Too much sugar is not good for us. We need to make sure that we know who's benefiting from the AI system that we're being asked to use. So that's your question number 4. And your fifth question, can I test it? You need to be able to test the AI system to know if it wobbles. If you remember when we made chocolate mousse, we did the wobble test. If the mousse wobbles, then we know there's a lack of stability. But there might be flexibility, but we need to test it. Always ask for sources of information when you're using a generative AI system, for example, and check those sources exist. So make sure you can test it. So there are your 5 questions. What type of AI am I using? What data has been used to train this AI if it's machine learning? How can this AI fail? What kind of failure might happen with this AI system? You might think of that as what are the limitations of this AI system? Who benefits from me using the AI system? Is it me or is it the company who's developed it? And finally, can I test it? Because I want to test it before I'm going to use it because I want to know its strengths and weaknesses. Now, you should always ask these questions, and if the person trying to persuade you to use an AI can't answer them, then you should ask yourself if they really know what they're talking about when it comes to the AI system that they're trying to persuade you to use. Now, that's the first 2 learning points for today. Understanding the different types of AI and knowing those 5 questions that you should always ask. The third learning point is all about human judgment and the need for the combination of artificial and human intelligence if we're really going to be power users of AI. And we're going to learn about this through the delicious Tarte Tatin. Right, so Tarte Tatin, we want that lovely crisp pastry and we want the caramel over the top of the apple. Now, caramel requires human judgment. So I have a recipe that's 175 grams of granulated sugar, 6 tablespoons of water, and I know that I must get the sugar dissolved on a low heat before I bring it to the boil and let it bubble away until it gets to the right point for caramel. Does it smell right? Does it look like a pale straw colour? Yes, I think it does. I think this is right because I've made it enough times before to have a sense of judgment as to whether this is going to be a nice caramel. If I let it go too far, it will be bitter. But there's no algorithm for it smells just right or I feel this is right. It's human judgment. So let's pop that caramel in the pan. Oh, that looks absolutely great. Now, of course, our second point of human judgment. We've got the caramel in the pan there and want the apples. But how are we going to arrange the apples? What kind of arrangement is right? Well, I'm going to arrange them in a particular way, which is quite informal because this is just for our supper tonight. It's not anything fancy, so I am just going to arrange the apples in concentric circles going from the outside in. Now, some people do it from the inside out, but I personally prefer the appearance from the outside in. Right, there we are. We've got the apple arranged in concentric circles of apple, and then finally the puff pastry that I've rolled out to be just a little bit bigger than pan so that I can pop it in and tuck it round the edges so that we get a bit of a seal. And I will now bake this for 25 to 30 minutes. But again, that's a judgment call. I'll set my timer, but I'll use my knowledge and my experience to know when it looks and smells right. Right, now it's time for the final judgment call on our Tarte Tatin. Now, it's hot. and it looks baked. But is it done? Is it not done? I won't know until I've done the famous flip, because now I've got to turn this out. So I'm going to put the plate over. Let's hope that my flip works. 1, 2, 3, flip. Let's hope it's turned out perfectly. Oh yes, that looks pretty delicious to me. Perhaps slightly more caramel than one would like. I think what I'm going to do with that is pop it under the grill to brown it up a little. Oh yes. Oh, lost a little bit of apple there. That looks delicious. Yes, we've got a bit of golden colour on there. Lovely caramel that's not going to be bitter because I didn't overcook it. I made the right judgment call. The apple's not terribly well defined, but I think that's fine for our supper tonight, and we'll really enjoy eating it. So I hope you've enjoyed Tarte Tatin. It's really important to understand how human judgment is essential to the best uses of AI. There is no algorithm for that smells just right for the caramel. There is no algorithm for I like this arrangement of apples for our dinner today. There is no algorithm to tell me exactly when it's baked or exactly when to flip to make sure that it turns out like this. We have to use our human judgment. There are some things that are just tacit in the world that have never been made explicit in an algorithm and can't be made explicit in an algorithm. We have to use our experience, work with the context, the type of temperature in the room, our knowledge of our oven to get this absolutely right. I hope you've enjoyed Rose's AI. I hope that you feel that you have a much greater understanding of artificial intelligence now, and that you know it's not magic, it's just pattern matching.